Welcome to the O Studio podcast, where we delve into the art of feeling better. My name is Matty Lovell, and O Studio is a recovery and well-being franchise that's here to help you relax, recover, and improve. Today on the O Studio podcast, we're joined by Pete Smith for his 5th appearance on the show. Pete always brings practical, straight talk insights, and today we're exploring weight management, what really drives change, and why so many people find it so hard to make progress that lasts. Let's jump in.
Pete Smith, welcome back to the O Studio podcast.
Thank you, Tim.
I don't know if you realize this is your fifth visit.
Is it?
So you're like the guest that keeps on getting sort of requested to come back. I think we've had one other person twice, but no one's come close to 5th, and just the nature of what you do. But just for people that don't know about you and what you do, can you give us just a brief sort of rundown of what type of work
Sure.
you do and what your background is?
Sure. I work in medical nutrition. So basically it's working with people who really want to understand the underlying causes of why they have a particular health condition, and then we help them very simply to reverse those causes where we can. And so the whole model integrates into your conventional health system, your medical system.
Mm-hmm.
One end you have public and private health, which is a hugely important role, and then at the other end we do the prevention if we can. But most people, it's identifying the reasons why and then trying to flick over those reasons and reverse those causes.
Yeah, cool. And obviously, we're big fans of your work, and your episodes have been really popular before. We've talked about stress, we've done cold water immersion, we did gut health, sleep, we did metabolic health as well. But today we wanted to talk to you about weight management, and in particular sort of weight loss, I guess. And I think, we looked up some stats, and, they're not great if you look at New Zealand as a whole. And I would say, compared to some other sort of, similar countries, I'd say that, we're probably still the better of a bunch. But I think it was 33.8% of adults are considered obese. And I know this is BMI, and I appreciate BMI is, not the be all end all in terms of management, but it still gives you an idea. So that's a third of adults. Another 31 to 35% of adults are considered overweight. And what really shocked me was like 12.5% of children aged between 2 and 14 are considered obese, which really blew my mind. And then 24% of children are outside of a healthy weight. And so I look at that and go, goodness me. And then I look back at my experience, and I sat in the gym for, half a decade and sold gym memberships. And I would say that, 85 to 90% of the people that came into the gym were there to try and lose weight. Some successfully, some not so successful. And it just seems to be a common I don't say ailment, but a thing that a lot of people are sort of focusing on is what percentage of people that come and see you are after some form of weight loss?
Most people stay away from me for weight loss because the way that we look at it is that weight gain is often a symptom of other health issues. So, when you understand, I'll talk about this a little bit, but when you understand some of those things that could be just as a consequence of what you're doing or what you have going on, despite all the exercise and the dieting and everything you've got, you're putting on weight. And so it's very rarely someone coming in. They've pretty much people have learned that they're better off going to someone else if they just want to lose weight. Mm-hmm. But if they want to really understand why they're putting on weight and why they can't get rid of it, then we've got to go. It was interesting with those stats because you're quite right about the way that they are measured. I mean, I think we all know that the populations are getting bigger. You just have to go back and look at the movies from 1970s, 1980s where we are bigger as a population. Mm-hmm. And being bigger doesn't necessarily mean a problem, but in some circumstances or situations it does. So I guess what we're going to talk about today are people in that position where they feel that they're overweight and they're looking at trying to sustainably remove it and build a lifestyle around making sure that it doesn't come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why do you think those stats are like that? Like when you look at, it's a pretty broad question, but, and maybe you don't feel like you can answer it, but, what's leading to, because when you look at those stats, they're also getting worse. So like these were from 23, 24, there were stats from 18 and 19, and all of them had got worse.
Yeah.
Every category got worse. So why do you think that's in terms of, weight management or the amount of weight that people are holding? Why do you think those stats are getting worse?
Oh, a lot of it's lifestyle, I think, Tim. Maddie, Tim. It's lifestyle and what we've been exposed to now. So, sort of 5 to 10 years ago, there are things there, environmental things that we weren't as exposed. A lot of it can be around just convenience. Everything we tend to do is making things easier, and that also sits with the food that we eat. And there's a lot of highly processed foods now. There have been some misunderstandings and misconceptions about what we should be doing to remove weight. So, a lot of those, not a lot, some of those protocols that people follow have been wrong, and as a consequence, they sort of lock themselves into a bit of a cycle where weight goes off for a while and then comes back on. But when it comes back on, it comes back with a vengeance, with more. So yeah, there's a lot of factors, and a lot of the environmental toxins, endocrine disruptors that we are exposed to through our environment plays a big part, I think.
You sort of alluded to a few things earlier, but I guess maybe it's a past school of thought, but when it comes to weight management, is the idea of it sort of simply coming down to calories in and calories out? Is that still a current school of thought, or is that a myth?
Well, no, it's not a myth. The bottom line is if you go and lock yourself in a room for a week and don't eat, you'll come out skinnier. That's a reality, but you'll also come out unhealthier, and that's a reality as well. So there is a component around that, but I think there's been a lot of research in these areas now, but and the research is more robust. So we have an understanding of sort of if you're reducing calories, how to do it, and what sort of calories and where do the calories come from. Mm-hmm. So that's all important. But this is a multi-dimensional type issue, if you like.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of just reducing calories and you'll fix your problems. So once you understand where your issues are, then you can go and start attacking them. But I will say from the outset, there is never, ever just one thing that causes weight gain. And to lose it, you never, ever do just one thing to remove it sustainably.
What are some of those other things?
Right. Okay. So probably the first thing to understand when we talk about this is there's weight loss and there's fat loss. So what we're talking about here, I assume, is fat loss.
Yes.
Because when people jump on the scales, they measure their body weight, and there are lots of factors that can determine their body weight. So their muscle density, for example, and you alluded that with the BMI, is going to change that scale weight. How much water they've drunk will change that. Whether they're holding water, the sort of food that they've had, whether they've had a lot of exercise, because the glycogen that we hold in our muscles and the liver can be anywhere up to half a kg. So if they jump on the scales, and some people do that after they've been to the gym, for example, and come back and go, oh, great, I've lost a bit of weight. Then they jump on them in the next morning and it's all back on again. And so all of these things are relevant. So fat loss is really what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. You need to understand as well that fat cells, we generally have our fat cells for our adult life by our mid-teens, at the latest our mid-teens. And fat cells never go away. They empty, but they don't go away. So if you are losing fat, you're emptying those fat cells, right? If you're putting on fat, you are filling them up again. If you fill them up and you are still have excesses, so the body wants to create more fat, then it will generate more fat cells.
Wow. You can never lose them.
No. The ones you've got, they empty. So all of us, three of us, none of us are overweight, but we have fat cells that are just sitting there waiting.
Mine are waiting and ready.
Yeah. All right. So, and then the other thing is that we talked about fat loss is never just one thing. So it's around habits and routines, your stress levels. Sometimes it's medication, sometimes it's supplements. Whether you're late to bed, and that's consistently late, your exercise levels. So whether they're high or whether they're low. So all of these factors will play a part. But the fact is, we can exercise and diet a little hearts out. But if we have a health condition, as we alluded to, that has, as a consequence of that health condition, weight gain, then everything we do in the gym, everything we do walking the streets, everything we do in the kitchen is pretty much null and void. You know?
What's an example of that?
I'll give you a couple of examples of them. So a common strategy to lose weight is to reduce calories, right? And so the logic would suggest the more calories you lose and the more exercise you do, so you're not putting any energy and you're burning a lot of energy, then you're going to lose weight. But you've got survival mechanisms in the body, and one of which is around your thyroid. So if your body believes that you're not getting the minimum number of calories in per day over a long period of time, and so I just think so some people might fast or reduce calories for a month or 2 months, then a survival mechanism will come in, and the first thing it's going to do is turn down your thyroid. Right? So your thyroid is your regulator of your metabolism, right? And because the thyroid thinks, right, any food that comes into the system, we've got to preserve that food, it will go and store it, and it'll store it in the area of the body around the trunk where it's most accessible to your major organs. Right? Mm-hmm. Then there are other things that happen. So the food comes in and there's nutrients in the food. So the body is getting now less nutrients, macro and micronutrients. And so the body goes, right, well, we don't want to waste them, sending them down to the extremities. Let's keep them around the body. So there's a vasoconstriction process. There's a compound in the body called nitric oxide, and it just drops down and everything compresses. Right? And so people will start to feel the cold in their feet and in their hands because there's less blood circulating around that area, because there's less nutrients going to that area. They'll get a bit of neuropathy, sometimes a bit of numbness, sometimes pins and needles, those sorts of things. So they are all symptoms of this thyroid turning down. Then there's a flow-on effect elsewhere. The simple solution is to eat, and all of those things go away. Hormonal balance is another. So if women, as part of that regular monthly cycle, have high estrogen in the back end, the luteal phase of their cycle, when estrogen levels should be below progesterone and they're higher, then the body will store the estrogen. So just as a hormonal imbalance, the body's going to go and store estrogen in its main reservoirs. And that's generally for women around the thighs, around the bottom and around the hips. Now they can then go and exercise themselves to death or starve themselves to death. They'll lose weight everywhere else, but they will not lose it there until they understand how to metabolize that. And with men, it's generally around, sort of the man boobs type thing, around the hips and around the back, those sort of things where we tend to hold that estrogen. And we've talked about stress as well. So remember the main stress hormone is cortisol, and the main primary role of cortisol, even though people think it's the stress hormone, the primary role of cortisol is to make sure that we never run out of glucose. All right, so if we are stressed, then the body is going to liberate glucose stored and put it back into our bloodstream, and that starts the process of activating insulin, and away that process goes. Now, if we're particularly inactive, or those stress levels are up all the time, that will just accumulate as weight.
Where does it pull glucose from?
Right. Okay. So it's probably, there's a hierarchy that the body burns energy. All right. And so right at the top of the hierarchy, if we have alcohol in our system, that is a fuel. That's our number one fuel. And the body won't burn anything else, as in glucose or fat, until the alcohol's been removed from the system. And it's a pretty slow process. So if you're going to have a big night out and then the next day you get up and go to the gym, depending on your goal at the gym, but there's no point having a goal of fat loss or weight loss after a night of alcohol, because it'll take you 60 to 90 minutes to be able to get, at the very least, to the door of burning fat. So you've got to burn off your alcohol first, then it goes after the glucose, all right? And there's different ways it burns glucose, and I'll come to that in a minute. And then when all the glucose is gone, only then will it start to then go and oxidate fat. Right? And so for some people, after a night out, that could be 2 or 3 hours of moderate exercise. Now, there's ways to circumvent all of that. So you want to know where glucose comes from? So the glucose comes from food primarily. So it comes into our system, it goes in, and the glucose that ends up at the end of the chain that produces energy doesn't look anything like the glucose that we ate, right? But it goes into our body and into our bloodstream. So carbohydrates, glucose into the bloodstream, insulin then carries it to our cells, and we have these receptors on the cells, and the receptors allow the glucose to go into the cells. Once in the cells, then they ideally go into the mitochondria. Now, we've talked about the mitochondria before, so for people who are not sure, the mitochondria are these little sort of powerhouses, energy furnaces, if you like, where we convert fuel into energy. And once it gets into that mitochondria, it's a bit like we use the analogy of a railway station, right? So you know how they change the tracks, those things. So there's really only 2 main forms of energy that our mitochondria burn for energy. That's glucose, and the other is fat, not protein. And yet the big craze at the moment.
It's one of my questions, actually.
So if you go high protein, you've got to go high fat then.
Well, it depends.
Yeah,
it depends.
sorry,
yeah, we'll come back. But it's a good question. So basically, protein has a lot of value, but primarily it's not used as one of our main fuels. So most people are loading up on this, and as a result of it, there are nutrient deficiencies as a result of just eating protein, because that's what they've been told to do on social media. All right. And so the most efficient fuel for our body to produce energy, and 90% of our energy that our body needs is produced in the mitochondria, it's called ATP, comes from glucose. It's the most efficient fuel. And I think we've talked about this before. When you have a molecule of fat or a molecule of glucose going into your system, it either produces two units of ATP or 36.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Remember that? So it's nothing in the middle, 36, 38. Nothing in the middle. All right. If you are on a keto diet and you are eating a lot of fat, or a carnivore diet and eating a lot of fat, then you pull the lever and fat is the dominant fuel that goes into the mitochondria, because only one or the other goes at the same time. So it goes in and you're only ever producing 2. Right? Glucose will always, if it's flowing properly, will produce the 36, 38. Right? So if you're not putting enough glucose in, or if there's too much fat and the body requires glucose because it is essential for our health, then the body will then, there's a couple of processes it uses. So one's glycolysis, where it starts to pull it out of our liver and our muscles, put it into our bloodstream and generate glucose there. And the other one is that if we're eating lots of protein, then there's a process called gluconeogenesis, which is creating glucose from those protein sources. Yeah. So even though you think I'm not eating carbs, I'm not putting glucose into my system from high protein diets, eventually it will. Now, those 2 systems, gluconeogenesis and glycolysis and lipolysis, are backup systems. They are really, really inefficient, right? But they are crucial to keeping us alive, to make sure we've got glucose in our system. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So if we are living on the backup system, a symptom of that is weight gain.
I see. Sounds like like what an asshole of a system. If like that seems the way, like everything. Because what I've heard, what we see is someone who's like, I feel like I've tried everything. It's quite a common thing when you talk about weight loss. I certainly heard it a lot, and we get people that feel like they're stuck. But from what I'm hearing from you is that there's fundamental underlying systems in our body which are thinking they're trying to be helpful, and I assume they're trying to be helpful because they want to help us survive. And so they are either preserving fat or restricting the ability for our body to lose fat, regardless of what you may or may not be doing in terms of exercise or diet.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, and people do. I mean, my view of this is there is no such thing as the perfect diet. Right, because if you stay with something for a long period of time, the body has this amazing adaptive ability. That's what it does. So if you go onto a carnivore type diet, even though there are some limitations around that and some risks around it long term, short term, because of that adaptation, you'll get a benefit. Similarly with a keto diet or a vegetarian or vegan diet. So there's nothing wrong with those, and people respond really nicely to them sometimes. And one of the obvious aesthetic responses is losing body weight, not necessarily body fat. Because sometimes if you're starving yourself at the same time, we'll talk about fasting in a minute, then you're actually burning muscle mass, right? Not fat.
Yeah.
So you get this atrophy. So you often see someone who has gone through a really, really intensive dieting process, but they're just a smaller version of the same body shape they were prior to going through.
Is it true that if you're sort of lifting heavy weights through fasting, then you won't lose muscle as much, or you won't lose muscle mass?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, so lifting weights or doing resistance work is incredibly important, but in a fasting context, it doesn't work efficiently. So again, we can talk about that if you want to come back to it or now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you are, we'll do exercise at the end. That's all right, and then we can sort of try and lock it all
together.
Yeah, because that's what people are looking for, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And so that we talked about sort of intense sort of dieting, fasting, detoxes, sort of 8-week challenges, that really restrictive sort of mindset. And I think that I think there is some, it can work short term. I've had it help me in the past, and I think there's value in it. I think you've talked about it in the past, but like are there broader issues around that as well in terms of a health context and a long-term health context?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just jotted this down before I came in because I wasn't sure which way we were going to go. But if you do a keto diet, we come back to the thyroid that we talked about before. What's really important for a thyroid function is glucose. But with a keto diet, it's low glucose. So the ability of your thyroid to convert T4 to T3, which is basically what's happening when you get your thyroid hormone working efficiently, is turned off. Right. So when we know that the thyroid gets turned off, we then get those consequences that we just talked about before.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a number of ways for that to happen. So your thyroid goes down, your stress hormones go up, your cortisol levels go up, and we know long term. Yeah, remember when keto came out, there was a lot of, hoopla. This is it. We found it, but it's now been going long enough for people to understand, the researchers to understand, the consequences of this long term are pretty severe. Because remember we talked before about the railway line, all right? And if you're mainly just eating through carnivore diet or keto, fat, then that's the main fuel that goes into your mitochondria. And it is the least efficient fuel.
Yeah.
So going on it for a short period of time, no problem. But if you are looking long term, then you're going to activate those backup systems, and those backup systems are not designed to be backup systems.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. So,
sorry, they're not designed to be long term.
Long term systems. Yeah. I get it. And so that's keto, that's carnivore, and so they've got a role in what you're saying. They do have some benefits, but it's more of a long term.
Sometimes we would use them if someone came in with a particular health condition. So sometimes with a cognitive condition, a keto can be beneficial short term, but you do not want to be on these things any longer than sort of a month.
Yeah, really.
to 6 weeks,
Yeah.
because pathways then start to adapt and start to change. And so that's why there's a principle called organised variation. So if you're looking at keeping your body and metabolism, in that red zone and really working and wired, then constant change is a great way to go about it.
Mm. But organised.
Organised variation.
Organised variation, yeah. So you just have to, you have to be very clear about your purpose and what you're trying to achieve, and then you can run up, a process to be able to help you achieve that.
Yeah. What about like time restricted eating or fasting? Very popular at the moment. There's lots of people telling you that it can do certain things, and I understand there's broader health benefits as well as just a change in weight. Is it still something that you are an advocate for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, managed fasting is really, really beneficial, because you think when the body becomes sick. So when we become sick, the first thing we tend to do around our food is that we go off our food. And why do we do that? Well, that's the body's natural response to stop us eating. When we don't eat and we're in the right environment, our body heals in a fasting state. But the problem that we see is often people coming through who have fasted for a long time. So I was talking to someone a week or so ago, and her start to the day is get up, eat nothing until around about 2 o'clock every day. Now, if you did it 2 or 3 days a week, you'd get benefits from that. But every day you don't, because immediately you've changed that lever for the railway track.
Yeah.
All right. And so if you're not getting enough calories coming in within glucose or within fats, then it's going to restrict the amount of energy the body makes. And you need to understand that when the body makes ATP, it's providing energy for everything in the body. And I think we've talked about this before, so, the big essential organs like the brain and the heart, they suck up a lot of this energy. And then your systems like your immune system and your digestive system, your microbiome, they all require lots and lots of energy. And right down the end of that continuum is the energy to get up in the morning and go to the gym or go to work or to socialise. And people often who are experiencing these really, really intense chronic fatigue type environments or just exhaustion have a metabolic issue. And you always come back and you'll find that, there is a link.
Mm. Yeah, and what about
Sorry, just to finish off on the fasting. So yes, fasting is beneficial, but you do not want to be doing it every day. It activates a number of compounds in the body. So there's a compound mTOR, and basically that is a regulator of your metabolism. It's great, but if you are, and we'll come to this in exercise when we get to exercise, if you are fasting before you go to exercise and you're looking at putting on muscle, you're completely wasting your time.
Yeah. So there is. It depends particularly on what the goal is, and from what I'm understanding, there's a large number of factors that also influence your body's ability to be able to lose fat. Is that correct?
Yeah. And what I really broad brush, there's a lot of people that are wanting to put on muscle and lose fat, and are wanting to try and utilize the gym or utilize exercise in a way to do that. And so, even just hearing you say that now, that I know so many people that train fasted. I'm one of them that will often train in a fasted state. But
it depends on the training though.
Yeah.
Because if it's cardio.
Yeah.
So okay, let's deal with this, because if you get up in the morning and you don't eat, right, and then you go to the gym, then what's happened overnight from the time that you finished eating to the start of the day, the next day, is that your body has been going through a repair and maintenance system. It's been burning energy. It's been burning glucose, which is remember that's part of that hierarchy. If you had alcohol in the system, it would have been burning that first. So you'd have a level of glucose still, or glycogen still left in your liver and your muscles, right? So when you go to the gym in a fasted state, the idea is to up the intensity right at the start. If you're looking at losing weight, not put on muscle, up the intensity right at the start of that session. So you can use weights to do that, doing deadlifts or squats or, sort of any combinations on a rowing machine, HIIT type exercises. And you do it for about 30 minutes or so, and that will burn off most of the other glycogen that you've got in your system. Then the mistake I see people doing is that they continue on for the rest of they have an hour session, they continue on doing the same thing, all the way through, and you don't need to do it. So just moderate intensity exercise, even low intensity, after you've burnt it off, is going to be more efficient at burning fat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But if you want to put on muscle, then you need to put fuel into your system prior to going. So you need to activate a hormone called mTOR, right, which is the one that the body requires, and turn off MK. So it's the one that the body requires to facilitate protein synthesis. So you might have a protein shake, right, and load up on that with a few amino acids in there, and some minerals and other bits and pieces, maybe a bit of creatine. Then you go off to the gym. You go and do your session. You come back. You have that protein shake again. Then straight after the protein shake, you go and have something that is sweet, because what that's going to do is cause an insulin response. And in this situation, insulin acts like a bit of an anabolic steroid, and it causes the process of protein synthesis. And then you've now got muscle growth. Because I think we've said this before too, when you go to the gym and you're exercising, it's catabolic. So it's breaking down the muscle.
Mm.
It's not, you're not actually,
muscle,
you're not building muscle in the gym, you're breaking it down. So all those little muscle fibers, it's when you come back and throw that food in on the other side of it, that's when you get the protein synthesis, and that's when you get the growth.
I'm going to try and just repeat that back to see if I've understood that properly. So just talking about training in and around fasting. So if you're wanting to, if you're doing cardio in the morning, like doing cardio in a fasted state's okay. You've got a bit of glucose still in your body that you're going to be accessing that, and then you'll start burning fat. You may burn a little bit of muscle through that window too, but you'll be burning fat predominantly. But if you're wanting to grow muscle, you're better off. You don't do it in a fasted state. Having protein either side of that training and a little bit of glucose after is the best sort of structure to grow muscle.
Yeah, and you'll work out what that is. Now, there's two things here. The single best way to burn body fat is to put on muscle. Right?
Yeah,
and women are slightly different than men. Right, so some women require food at the start of a process to burn the body fat, and the type of food that you would have could be just something around the likes of protein, because when you structure your day, I mean, if you're looking at managing your day, you're trying to take out the bits in the middle, right? So that's your snacking, right? And so if you can load your day up, which the start of the day is more protein, middle of the day is more fat, and the end of the day, carbohydrates. Because the thing that you've got to understand is that we should be, and we're talking generally here, but we should be having 40 to 60% of our total calories coming from good quality carbohydrates over a course of a day.
Like such as?
So vegetables, ripe fruit, white rice, they're all really, really good. If you get your fat intake, and then there's different types of fat, but if you get your fat intake higher than 30% of your total calories, then you have now pulled the lever, and fat is going to go into that mitochondria and dominate it, right? And all the glucose gets pushed back out. And then the balance is protein. So
10%.
20%, depending on where you are, yes. So the more exercise you do, the more protein you require. The older you are, the more protein you require. But if you're structuring a day, protein at the start of the day, fat, and it's just loosely, fat around the middle of the day.
Which could be?
Or eggs, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're using oils, one of the oils you need to be really, really careful about, it's this linoleic acid, and so there's a lot of research coming out now around the pros and cons of saturated and unsaturated fat. So we've had pumped down our throats. Unsaturated fats are the healthy fats, the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. Well, that is actually not true. So it's the saturated fats that are the ones that give us the best bang for our buck. And so if we're cooking, we should stay away from stay away from these seed oils and vegetable oils, even olive oil that we're finding is, has been adulterated in most cases, and use for cooking. The best things you can use would be butter, use ghee, use beef tallow, coconut oil, those sorts of things, and you'll get a better return. The linoleic acid that comes, which is an omega-6 fat that comes from those seed oils particularly, but other things as well, is essentially the new smoking. And what we know is that those linoleic acids, they absolutely destroy the membrane of the mitochondria, which means they die.
Wow. Avoid seed oils.
Big time, yeah.
Yeah. You could. What I'm sort of learning is that, and historically I've probably been more of the school that weight loss is probably more around willpower. It's sort of like, do I have the willpower to follow the right diet and get enough exercise? And I think that's a component of it from what you're saying, but also there's some underlying core systematic issues in the body that will outdo or restrict the benefits of what willpower is able to do. Is that fair?
100%. No amount of willpower will turn off weight gain as a consequence of a health issue.
It's scary.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, so they battle away and they become very, very frustrated around it all.
Yeah.
But it's, the willpower is important, right? But willpower comes from discipline and results. So you need to start getting traction pretty early in the game. And so if you're doing some of these things that we're talking about, that we'll try and summarize it at the end, you will get traction quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, a lot of it's around habits matter, so we have habits that we have ingrained in us and we're doing them, day after day after day after day, and they can be counterproductive. And a big one, we talked about snacking before. We've got to stay away from it. There's the whole model around morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, supper, all of these sort of things are fatal, because if you're constantly putting food into your system, there's a process in the body called a migrating motor complex, the MC. And what it does is that it moves food from the stomach out, pulses, moves it from the stomach into the small intestine and starts moving it out, all right, through the body. But when we snack, so I'll go back. So from finishing eating to starting to the next eating, we should ideally be having around about 4 to 5 hours. And that will allow MMC to activate. When we're constantly snacking, MMC doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get food and other hard to digest food, particularly proteins. They sit in the stomach, they ferment. Fermentation leads to bloating and blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the symptoms that people are experiencing with increased fat in their system are these types of digestive types of issues that are all going. So the way that I would approach fat loss is focus on how you feel first, and then focus on how you look second. And once you I'm feeling good, I'm energetic, things are really going well, then you'll start to notice some physical changes.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're saying is actually probably quite relieving for a lot of people. I think that if you put yourself in the shoes of someone that's tried to lose weight for a long time but hasn't been able to, it can be it's one of those really a tough thing to go through and think that what on earth I'm doing wrong. So I think in some ways this is good news. In some ways, in some ways it's bad news. But other ways I think it's really good. But I'm still really keen to understand how exercise fits into the picture. We've spoken a lot about diet so far, and where does exercise fit in terms of fat loss?
Okay, so it plays a big role, but it needs to be done correctly. I would say exercise is probably about 20%. The mistake people make is that they go there, and the younger they are, the more they can go there and smash themselves and they'll get a response. Once they start hitting the mid-30s, that's when our metabolism, the efficiency of our metabolism changes. And most of us have been through all that experience where all the things that we were doing up to those mid-30s, now we were starting to, sort of carry a bit of extra weight around the place, and we're just struggling with sleep and everything else. So It's about 20%. And the mistake you make is only using exercises as your main strategy for weight management, because all it's going to take is an injury. All it's going to take is some sickness of some sort, and then the bottom falls out of it, and then you're really going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Combining different strategies is by far the best way to go, and being very clear about what your goals are. But I keep coming back to that caveat, and the caveat is you can do all of this stuff, you can exercise and feel better and get fitter, which is really great. But if you still have underlying health issues that are compromising that ability to be able to keep that metabolism going, burn those fuels, put the right fuels in, burn the fuels, take the energy, the ATP, and let it go and do its thing around your body, get the right nutrients into your system, you are eventually going to end up back where you started.
Mm-hmm.
And you often talk about people who yo-yo, right? So they'll lose weight, going well, and then all of a sudden it just becomes too hard, and there are other factors that go on. Your microbiome plays a big role in it.
So, like, if someone doesn't have underlying health issues, or they've got the underlying health issues under control, and so we'll leave that to one side. We've got the diet sort of placed right. We're talking a little bit about exercise. What are the other things that can impact this area? You mentioned stress before.
Yeah, stress is one. Making sure that your stress levels are under control. And if anyone's wants some guidance around the stress, they're probably best just to go and have a look at that podcast that we did on stress. One of the other tools that I'm surprised you guys haven't mentioned is the whole cold plunge. Because there, again, the research around this is just booming, and it's been there for generations, literally been for generations, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. But as a sort of a Western population, we've only just sort of clicked onto this in the last few years. But basically there's a podcast on that, so they can get a bit more detail. But basically there's a process where neurons in the body are activated, and when they're activated, they will cause the body to convert white fat into brown fat. And brown fat is what we want because that's loaded with mitochondria. And the activation is adrenaline. Now, so there's adrenaline can come from two different sources. One, it can come from stress, right, and through the adrenal glands, and that's not the one we're talking about. We're looking at adrenaline that comes from the neurons in your body. How do you get that adrenaline activation? Well, one of the best ways of doing that is shivering. All right. And so a simple strategy is to get into a cold plunge, and you need to make sure you do things right around the temperature and just making sure you're right. Get in there until you start to shiver. And that shivering is going to activate that conversion of white to brown, all right, and start generating increased mitochondria. And that's basically you're losing that visceral fat around the body. Yeah. All right. Then you get out. So it may be that it only takes you a minute, 2 minutes before you start shivering. So hold in there for another 30 seconds, then get out of the water. Don't dry off, just stand there. Then get back in again. You'll find that the shivering will come in quicker, all right, and then get out again. And you can repeat that process 4 or 5 times. And it's a great strategy that you can use. Then, if you're looking at burning fat, you can then go and exercise. And you think about the use of cold plunging. We tend to do it on the other side, on the back side of exercise. But if you turn it around and do the cold plunging, then go and exercise, even just to walk, then you've created this whole process of thermogenesis in your body where your body's wanting to burn calories to warm you up, to heat you up. Right?
Yeah.
Now, can I just make a comment, because I had a few questions about this, because there's a bit of stuff on social media around women shouldn't be cold plunging.
Yeah.
Right, you hear that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So there is absolutely no, and we've spent a lot of time looking at this. There's no clinical validation to that claim whatsoever. And if you go and look again in the Northern Hemisphere and look at who mainly cold plunges, who gets into the rivers over there, and what's happening around their immune systems and around their cancer rates and cardiovascular rates and everything else is predominantly women, right? And so there is nothing that's been validated around this. It's just somebody's, sort of jumped up on there, and all of a sudden other people freak out. So the only caveat around that is that what the cold plunge does, it creates inflammation in your system. It's a stress response, right? Mm-hmm. So if a woman has polycystic ovaries, PCOS, or endometriosis, you may want to just put exclamation marks around that. And my advice would be, don't make it too cold. You need to be in the 10 to 12 to 15. Mm-hmm. The other thing we do know from this process is that the cold immersion for women increases progesterone. And progesterone is the problematic hormone for the second part of a woman's cycle, when it's generally low, when it shouldn't be. It should be high. And so increased progesterone is highly, highly beneficial as long as it's within that balance. And the only other thing, I could comment, but there's no evidence one way or the other. It's just some people just have to make the decision. If you are, around fertility, if you're looking at getting pregnant, I don't know. I haven't read anything. I just don't know. But ovulation around that time, in the middle of that month, middle of the cycle, that might be a time that you certainly don't want to go into, 3 degrees of water. But I don't know.
Yeah,
right?
I love it.
It's been an interesting topic on our network a lot, actually, in the last sort of last few months. And so, it's really interesting how we sort of say, obviously we know what we're putting into our body is important in terms of diet. We know that exercise is an important part of it. What you've sort of highlighted is some core sort of underlying health concerns that you may not even manifest in daily sort of life that could be preventing you from being able to lose fat. Where does someone start listening to this now? Because this is going to come out, when someone's listening to this, it's going to be early 2026, the new year. A lot of people look at it and go, right, I'd love my body to be in a better shape at some later stage in the year. Where does someone start in terms of diet, exercise, stress?
I think the best thing is they need to be able to have a benchmark to launch from. Right, and so I'm not promoting what we do here, but if they wanted to do an assessment to determine whether they have any of those, we can help them with that. But the way that I look at it is that if you're going to lose body fat, you want to lose fat, and you want to keep it off indefinitely and be lean and healthy, then you're better off doing it properly rather than just sort of having a bit of a crack at it or looking at somebody online and thinking, oh, she looks like me or he looks like me, I think I can do that. Mm-hmm. Every one of us, it's like a fingerprint. We respond differently to different stimuli. And so that's why some people get beautiful benefits from, plant-based diets or, keto or whatever. Mm-hmm. But long term, they will always have consequences. But so that would be the starting point to
understand.
Yeah, to get a
what are you working with?
Get to the starting line and know exactly what you're starting with. It'll cost you a few bucks, right? But you're better off knowing what you need to deal with first if you need to deal with it, rather than just launching into this thing of, buying a gym membership, buying new shoes, buying a bike, and off you go. Yeah. And at the end of the day, nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and that's, people have gone round and round in circles for, could be years in the same sort of situation. And are there any are there any key fundamentals that the calories in, calories out was probably maybe what you're saying is that there aren't really any key fundamentals if the underlying system is broken.
Well, yeah, there are. There's things you can do that will help. So I go back to the calories in, calories out. Yep, it is actually, it's a thing. But the thing you don't want to do is go and shock your system and just simply stop eating. Yeah. So that's that sort of whole fasting indefinitely. And we've talked about the consequences of that. The best way of doing it is that you look at your typical meal, and you don't even need to look at what the meal is, the proteins, fats and carbs ratio. But if I keep coming back predominantly it should be carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
That is the single most important fuel for energy for the body and for weight loss, fat loss. Fats, less than 30% of your total calories, and protein, depending on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to probably reduce your total calories, so the food that you put in, by 10%, so 5%. Now, you can do that just by stopping snacking,
Mm-hmm.
right, or not having anything after tea, or look at your end of the day meal and go, all right, well, if I'm going to take something out, what would I take out?
Mm-hmm.
Or no dessert, or no drinks afterwards. Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
All right. And then once the body has responded nicely to a 5 or a 10% reduction in calorie, you can push it up to about 20, 25%. That's all you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that will protect you from some of those defense mechanisms coming in and kicking in, and then causing, the rebound, the other issues.
Yeah, we haven't really spoken about it much today, and I don't think maybe it's a conversation for another time. But just the this is a topic that people think about. Thinking about you put them into two different categories, which I think is quite good, which is feeling better and then looking better. And I think all of us have some level of wanting to improve each of those. Of feeling a little bit better in the way that we operate through a day and think and act and feel. And then also this aspect of looking better as well. And I mean, there's a lot that sits within both of those areas. The emotional side of why people do what they do and the battles that they have internally. But I think today's given a good snapshot, really, of. I mean, what I've heard is you need to get some understanding of what's really going on within your body first before you really do anything, and so seeing an expert to understand that.
Well, if there is an issue,
Yes.
and the younger you are, the less likely it's going to be an impact. So you just have to get the strategy right. You don't need to deal with, unless there's big issues. Mainly women would be hormonal.
Yeah.
But if there are issues, then they're pretty easily fixed.
Yeah.
But yeah, the feeling well and looking well, they're like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we just get them around the wrong way. So I mean, I can think of someone who's come in, in the last 3 or 4 months with a cancer diagnosis, right? And then when you ask him what his goal is, his main goal was to lose weight.
Wow.
So it was like, okay, so we need to have a conversation around really what that goal is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Everyone's slightly different, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because it may be just from a whole cognitive perspective that was the way that he wanted to go. But generally, you do the feeling better first, and then that's motivation to then get out and do the business.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you sort of talked about like a fingerprint. Everyone's slightly different, and some people will respond to different protocols better, different diets better, different exercise regimes. But if people are listening and going, I do want to, have an assessment or meet with you or one of your team, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I'll continue the offer, so people can just email and me at pete@anthempree.com. And I'll give them, they can just email me, I'll get back to them, we'll organise a time, we can just have a free consultation. And sometimes, as has happened with many, we can sort out some of the little bits and pieces they have in that time. And they can then just go from there. If they then want to go to the next stage and finish, sort of an exercise, it's just a questionnaire that's based around the symptoms that they might have, and we can then give them a profile back and explain very, very clearly about what they have going on, if there is anything going on, and we can give them some strategies to deal with that if they're not too serious.
Yeah, cool, fantastic. And I know we appreciate you making that offer to our audience. I know that we've had clients, we've had franchise owners, we've had partners of everyone that have come in and
there's been a few.
Yeah, that have been part of it. So we appreciate your support. And I think, this is just an issue that with the way, modern age is shifting and the lifestyles that people are living, I think is only going to increase. And so I think, we look at those stats that I read off right at the start, right?
Yeah. Well, they're not going to get better unless we really understand. And, there's a massive big weight loss industry out there. And, it always surprises me that they take a lot of money off these people, launch these people into, these big plans or programs, but in most cases they haven't gone back and determined whether there are some roadblocks there before they even start.
Yeah.
So, and that's quite important. If you want to do it properly, that would be my suggestion. Sort of sort out and deal with anything that's in the way.
Fundamental underlying issues.
Yep. And then we can help them with a plan to go and knock this off. But you don't want to be going up and down all the time, because I don't know why it happens, but each time you tend to come back and try and lose weight again, it's 20% more difficult, roughly. And then the next time it's 40%. So people understand that. And a lot of that is a lot to do with your microbiome, So, if you're in a position where you are fasting and your body's going to that survival mechanism, it will generate bacteria that they're called methanobrevii, that go and pull more calories out of the minimum amount of food that you eat. So these bacteria start populating.
Yeah.
And then they're all sitting there. And of course, you finish your diet and then you go back eating normally and these things are still here.
Yeah.
So you've got more.
Yeah. What's what's the best, I'm always conscious of, like what's the best way to be measuring your health? Like BMI, we know it's outdated. I think I'm obese. We know to look at BMI. And so I take those stats with a grain of salt. But is weight, I know it's a very accessible term of measurement for someone's health, but is trying to weigh less a good goal for someone?
Well, if they use the scale, so the best measure for weight is your height to waist ratio.
Okay.
All right. So if you're 180 centimetres, then your waist circumference from tummy button to tummy button in a relaxed state should be around about 90 centimetres or less.
Okay.
So that's the best one. The scales, unfortunately, we've talked about this before, tell lies.
Yeah.
Right? They give you information about weight loss, not fat loss.
Yeah.
Shopkeepers, partners, looking in reflections in the mirrors and shop windows, they're all misleading. The best way of doing it is basically that height to waist ratio. And if you start losing weight, fat around the trunk, then you are going to be healthier. You're going to look leaner. You'll have that sort of triangle shape, and you can then start manipulating what you want to look like with weights and everything else. And so that's one. The other is around your health, around your metabolic flexibility. So when we wake up in the morning, if you just had I think we've had this before too, a thermometer, right? Yeah. You put it under your tongue, and basically your wake up temperature should be around that 36.345 degrees, right? And then you go and eat whenever you do eat, and you take your temperature 20 minutes or so after you've eaten, and that temperature should go up. If the temperature doesn't go up, it means that your metabolism is inefficient, or you're putting the wrong food in to generate that. Yeah, because the body has to heat up thermogenesis to burn food.
Burn fat. Yeah, I get it. And just back to that height to waist ratio, and that's the same for a female as well.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and so it's around the tummy button, and what you said, it's pretty much 2 to 1. So you, for whatever you are height wise,
roughly,
about half of that should be your
roughly. Yeah. I mean, there's all different body types and somatotypes and body shapes, right? And so that's why it's the tummy button as opposed to the hips, or around the around the bottom, that sort of thing. So around that area will give you a pretty good gauge of what's going on. But if I come back to, say, for example, with women, what will cause a bit of a distortion there is that if they have that hormonal imbalance. So the estrogen, where it goes and stores in an area, so it starts coming off, and you just have to understand how to metabolize it and get it off. And I've just watched some remarkable changes in women who do this properly, and really, really, really put the effort in, but apply the science, if you like, around it. And they've gone from, a situation where they've been really uncomfortable with the weight around their thighs and their hips and their bottom, to getting rid of that estrogen, making sure your detox system is working and everything's going well, and just things change.
Yeah. What's the time frame between when someone sort of starts the process to when they can start visibly noticing results? I think that's always when someone's on a journey with around weight, like one of the biggest motivators is progress. You can actually when you can see that you're making progress, it becomes really easy to stick at it. And I think that most people can try things for a few weeks, but I don't know if that's long enough to sort of have an impact.
20% rule. So if this is your 50th attempt at losing weight, it'll take longer, right? Because it's 200 or 300% harder. But if you do it right, if you get rid of any blocks and then you start the process right, you'll start to notice things within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And a lot of the initial loss is water weight, but if people use the scales, then they'll start to see some changes. But it's how your clothes feel, and that's the big one. So we all have clothes that we'd like to be able to go back into, but just we can't because we're carrying extra in that area there. And it's understanding that when weight comes off, it'll come off the extremities first. So it comes off your face and your neck and your arms and your legs. The last place for it to come off, unfortunately, is around the tummy area. When it goes on, it goes the other way. So it goes on that area first. So if you're doing it right, certainly if you give yourself 4 weeks a month, you will notice some measurable changes.
Yeah. Okay. And one more question. I should have asked this at the start, maybe, just sort of, is weight a good indicator of health?
No, not necessarily. It's a marker, all right, because, weight, lots of adipose tissue is inflammatory, all right, but some of us are just bigger in size, right? Bigger in build. And so you jump on the scales, and I've got family members who are heavily muscled. The musculature is huge. So they're big people. They jump on the scales, and it's like, blows out. But in terms of their skin folds, their fat levels, they wouldn't be any more than sort of between 20 and 25%.
Yeah.
Right. So are they healthy? Yeah. In terms of where they are, you don't use weight as a measure of that. But if you are obese and you know that it's a barrier to a quality lifestyle, if you're constantly getting health issues, then yes, it will be.
Yeah.
It will be a factor.
And can you be skinny is the wrong word. Can you be
Skinny
skinny
fat?
and unhealthy?
Yeah, it's called skinny fat. And so you sometimes see this where people are doing a lot of cardio exercise, but they aren't dealing with that hormonal balance. And one of the big hormones around this is the one that causes the weight on the tummy is insulin resistance. Yeah. And it's not just from food, it's also back from that process we talked about before where food is going through into the mitochondria, along the electron chain. There's 5 different steps or complexes it needs to go through. All right, and if you're putting the wrong balance of foods in, if you're not doing that process right, then there can be a backlog. Glucose gets pushed back into your bloodstream, increase insulin resistance, and then for women particularly women in menopause, the biggest issue they need to deal with around diet is making sure that they've got an insulin sensitivity type eating plan, and that will help them just take it off.
Gosh, it's always more complex than you think it is, but it's also like, I think knowledge is power, right? And there's nothing worse than feeling like you're just going round and round in circles. And I know a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't want to be trying to do all things,
yeah.
right? So that's why having a plan, getting to the starting line with plenty of knowledge and good ammunition about what you're trying to achieve, what you want to look like, and how you want it to run, and what you're prepared to do. Then you can run your plan.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. People start and they feel, oh my God, I'm not getting results. They see somebody else doing something and they're flip flopping all the time, and that's generally pretty fatal.
Yeah, and you make no progress, and it's disheartening as well.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I understand. Like you try so hard, and I come back. Some of the people I see in the gym, they are the hardest workers in the gym, but they've just got it wrong. They really just they've been given guidance or advice, or they've sought some, or they've found some, and they think somebody's going to end up with them, and that's that thumbprint again. There are so many different little variables that will impact how the body responds to that stimuli, the exercise stimuli, to the food, to the cold plunges, you know, to the lack of sleep. All of those sorts of things will impact.
Yeah, gosh, it's so interesting. Well, I couldn't recommend your help and advice more. And again, we appreciate the offer that you've made to listeners. And it's always good to see you, always good to connect, and appreciate your advice and time as always.
No problems, Manny.
Pete Smith, thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the O Studio podcast. If you enjoyed it, please hit the follow button wherever you're listening and connect with us on social media at O Studio Global. Our purpose at O Studio is to make recovery and well-being as accepted, as understood, and as practiced as physical fitness. To achieve this, we're building premium wellness hubs around New Zealand and Australia where communities come together to sauna, ice bath, float, recover, and so much more, all in beautiful spaces designed for everyday people. Check out ostudio.co.nz to find a studio near you or explore how you could bring O Studio to your community. Own the moment.